Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Yes, I am still here and I'm still fighting. So last week was really tough because a lot of small bad things happened in a very short period of time. And after reading your comments, thank you for your support, by the way, I realized that I was not the only one who had a complete wreck of a week. And actually, after reading the news, I realized that it wasn't just us smaller guys and gals who are struggling. We just happen to have less of a safety cushion than the bigger players, so we feel it more. But the reality is, everyone right now is having a hard time and wondering when things are actually going to get better. So let's chat about it. Ready? Let's go! So over the past week or so, several big companies, the big players in the trucking industry, have released their numbers, and oh boy, it's not good. First, we have JBHunt, who has been struggling, and I quote, "The company posted a profit of 127.5 million, which was 70.3 million less than it earned in the same period last year. Meanwhile, revenue missed forecast of 3.11 billion and instead slumped 9% to 2.94 billion. Then we have PAM Transportation, another big player who reported an operating loss for a second straight period. And according to FreightWaves, PAM recorded an operating loss of 677,000 in the quarter, which followed the 811,000 operating loss in the fourth quarter. Why did this happen? Well, their president, Joe Vitrito, said that, and I quote, "Shippers' continued success in leveraging an overcapacity market to their advantage to attain rates at or below cost was the reason for the poor quarter." Now, their operating ratio was 104.2%. And if you're not familiar with what an operating ratio is, it's basically a measure of the expenses as a percentage of revenue. So an operating ratio of 104.2% means that 104.2% of their revenue went to cover their expenses, a loss. And finally, we have Marten Transport, which had a decline in revenue of 7.5% from a year ago period. Now, according to their financials, their net operating ratio in the first quarter of 2024 for the truckload segment was 99.5%. So only 0.5% was actual profit. Then for dedicated, it was 87.1%, 12.9% was profit. Their intermodal segment had a loss operating ratio of 101.5%, and their brokerage segment posted 92.4% operating ratio, where 7.6% was recorded as a profit. So it looks like their dedicated was the best performing sector with 12.9% profit. Now, what about those brokers? Are they faring well in this market? Well, the answer is no, they are not. So for those of you who don't know, who haven't seen that short, over the past week, I have had 2 loads recoursed by one broker, 2 loads that we did back to back because the broker, who has been in business for a while, who had a great credit score and was rated good on factoring, ended up going out of business before paying our factoring company. And the worst part, filing against their bond did not work. Not because the bond already paid all the other carriers, no, because, and this is something new I learned, it was an intrastate load. It was within the same state. Both of these loads were intrastate. And the bonding company is regulated by the FMCSA, governed by the FMCSA. So they are not obligated to pay intrastate loads, only interstate loads. And no, the shipper, the customer, has not gotten back to me yet regarding the payment for this load. I did reach out, but I'll keep on pushing. So yeah, brokers are definitely in a tough spot right now. And the worst part is when a broker ends up going under, they drag the carriers they have worked with down with them. Now, according to Kevin Hill, who is an expert at Brush Pass Research, which gathers intelligence on key decision makers at freight brokerages, Brokers are saying it's a brutal market. Signing up new shippers is a challenge, getting more loads is a challenge, and pricing something profitably is a challenge. Hill said that while there are 27,000 active brokers with motor carrier numbers operating in the US, 88% of the industry's gross revenue is controlled by the top 1,000 brokers. And the largest of those, the top 50 or so brokerages that compete with the largest asset-based truckload carriers for volumes, have suffered the brunt of the freight recession. Interesting. So now, of course, comes the question, is this rock bottom? Or is rock bottom actually much, much deeper than we initially thought? Well, Craig Fuller of FreightWaves believes that larger carriers are starting to capitulate. What does that mean? Well, I quote, "Capitulation," Fuller said, "involves the moments where the larger carriers have realized that they're going to have to do things that they do not want to do." In other words, Fuller believes that larger carriers who survive primarily on contract rates, right? They don't really use the spot market much, are going to start making concessions and have already started making concessions in terms of rates. And because of this, he believes that the market will start improving soon. So let me explain the contract versus spot market so that we're all on the same page here. For the most part, contract carriers are more or less shielded from the daily fluctuations of the market. They also have set rates for a period of time. So their income side does not suffer as much as for carriers who are on the spot market. Now, the fluctuations in the spot market can be really brutal. And I'll give you a perfect example that kind of sent me over the edge last week. My truck got stuck for the weekend in Wisconsin. Why? Because Wisconsin, which has been a market that I have relied on for the past 5 years to have something. It might not be something incredible, but something. All of a sudden, that market was paying on average on a Friday 47 cents per mile for flatbed loads. Why did this happen? Because almost all the loads on the load board were partial. This is the reality of being on the spot market. You are at the mercy of the daily fluctuations that happen. And sometimes you don't even know what caused it. Now, going back to spot versus contract rates. If more carriers, especially the big guys, start accepting lower contract rates, what does that lead to? Well, it leads to these carriers being more exposed to the reality that we spot market carriers face, which means that these contract carriers start either downsizing. Some of them will be forced to shut their doors. And this is because they'll have a harder time turning a profit, right? And as this happens, the tender rejection levels will start going up because the capacity is no longer as robust as it is right now. And the more tender rejections, the more volume ends up on the spot market. As Craig Fuller said, I think as we see contract rates refresh, as new rates come in, I am bullish for that, as that is capitulation. So my point is, regardless of whether you work on the spot or on the contract market, whether you run a big or small operation, whether you have been in business for 30 years or 3 months, this is happening everywhere and to everyone. And to be quite honest, when I was reading the news and looking through these operating ratios of these big players, I was completely shocked because I was convinced that the big players got so big because they knew how to handle these challenging situations, and maybe they were a little bit more creative or had more of an ability to handle this kind of market with maybe a little bit more ease. But you know what? Nope, not a chance. This market is brutal and it does not discriminate. So for those of you who are looking for advice of what do we do in this situation, how can we survive, right? The best advice I can give you is advice that I'm following myself. I am not a guru, but I know one thing for sure. Cut your expenses and get comfortable with feeling super uncomfortable for a while. You can't change the rates, not on the contract market, not on the spot market, but you can look at your operations to see where you are overpaying and where you can cut out an expense completely. That's what I'm doing. For example, you guys might have realized that I'm not in my office anymore, and that's because that is an expense, even though it was my personal expense. It was not the company's expense. But still, I'm a business partner. I cut that expense out altogether. I downgraded my load board. I tried to avoid the East Coast because the tolls are higher. I tried to avoid Oregon because the taxes are higher there, and so on and so forth. It's time to live lean. I'm a strong believer in the saying, when there's a will, there is a way. And I am pretty confident that the majority of you have the will to survive, so you will find a way to do it. And if you feel completely beat down, then learn to take a break, take a moment to breathe. And when you're ready, keep fighting, whatever that fight may look like for you. Wishing you all patience during these challenging times. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.